Do you believe the only way to overcome fear is by charging at it head-on, forcing it into submission? If so, you've been told only half the story. This modern mantra, that fear must be crushed with sheer willpower, is one of the most misleading notions of our age. It may even be the reason so many people remain trapped, endlessly circling the same inner struggles, never finding true release. Carl Jung, one of the most profound thinkers of the 20th century, offered a radically different vision. For him, fear was not a dragon to be slain, but a language to be understood. Not a wall to break through, but a doorway we keep overlooking. Jung saw fear as a message, an invitation from the unconscious, that if decoded, could lead us to a deeper form of freedom than mere conquest ever could. And here lies the paradox. The more we treat fear as an adversary, the stronger it grows in the shadows. Like a weed cut at the stem, it springs back fiercer than before. You've probably felt this yourself, pushing through fear only to have it return days, months, or years later in a slightly different form. It's not because you are weak. It's because the method itself was incomplete. What if within every fear you carry lies a hidden key, one that unlocks the very parts of yourself you've been longing to reclaim? That key is not brute courage nor defiance, but something far subtler, awareness. True awareness has the power to transform fear from a tormentor into a teacher. So, pause for a moment. Forget everything you've been told about being brave or fearless. Instead, ask yourself, what is the fear that challenges me most right now? Is it fear of rejection? Fear of failure? Fear of death itself? Whatever it is, hold it in your mind. Reflect on it. If you feel bold enough, share it aloud, even if only with yourself. That simple act of naming it, of pulling it from the shadows into the light, is the very first step toward transformation. Fear, Jung insisted, is never random. It does not emerge out of nothing. It is the pulse of something essential within you, something you've avoided, ignored, or exiled from awareness. Every time you run, every time you distract yourself, you are not just fleeing from an emotion. You are rejecting a piece of your own soul. This is why Jung's perspective is so revolutionary. Instead of viewing fear as an enemy, he saw it as a sacred messenger. A courier from the unconscious, bearing truths we find uncomfortable, but truths that will not leave us alone until we face them. Think of the countless times society has urged you to face your fears or to just push through it. How often did that actually work? How often did the fear vanish, never to return? Or did it simply find another mask, another moment to seize you unexpectedly? From the Jungian lens, the truth is stark. Fear will always return until you listen. It is not a barrier standing in your way. It is a signpost, pointing directly toward the parts of yourself you most need to understand. And that realization changes everything. How many times in your life have you heard the words, "Face your fears," or "Just push through it"? Society repeats these phrases like spells, as if courage alone could banish fear into the void. And yet, be honest, has that ever truly worked? How many times has fear returned, sometimes stronger, even after you thought you had defeated it? The problem isn't you. The problem is the myth. The modern world teaches us to treat fear as an obstacle to overcome, but Carl Jung turned this logic on its head. For him, fear wasn't a wall to smash through. It was a signpost, a signal pointing toward the very places within ourselves we least want to visit. Jung called these hidden corners of the psyche the shadow, a realm where we bury the parts of ourselves we find unbearable: weakness, shame, envy, vulnerability, even tenderness. Fear often stands as the guardian of that shadow. It blocks the way, not to torment us, but to warn us that we are approaching something raw and essential. Think of it this way: when you recoil at the thought of failure, Perhaps what terrifies you isn't the failure itself, but the confrontation with the part of you that still feels unworthy. When you dread rejection, perhaps what you fear is not the act of being turned away, but the echo of an ancient wound, the child within who once felt abandoned. Fear, then, is not the enemy. It is the protector of truths we've exiled. This is why suppression never works. We try to silence fear with distraction, ambition, alcohol, medications, or endless scrolling on our phones. But these are only temporary barricades. Fear finds another way in. It appears in sleepless nights, sudden bursts of anxiety, or self-sabotaging behaviors. Its persistence is not cruelty. It is persistence because the message remains undelivered. Jung described this process almost like a myth. He imagined fear as a gatekeeper, a hooded figure standing before the entrance to the underworld. You can run from it, but eventually you must pass by. And when you do, the gatekeeper reveals what you most need to see. Not a monster, but a mirror. To walk through that gate is to begin the journey of wholeness. Jung insisted that those dark, frightening aspects of the psyche we call the shadow are not poison, but potential. Within the shameful, rejected, or painful fragments of ourselves lie the very seeds of transformation. Fear guards this because it knows we are not yet ready to confront them lightly. And so the paradox is this: what frightens us most is often the very thing we need most. Fear does not block the path. It is the path. If fear is not an enemy, then what is it guiding us toward? For Jung, the answer was nothing less than the central task of human life: individuation. Individuation is not a term you hear in everyday conversations, yet it is the silent thread running through every human story. It is the lifelong journey of becoming who you truly are. Not just the person you show the world, not just the mask you wear for survival, but the full, integrated self hidden beneath layers of habit, expectation, and fear. In this journey, fear plays a paradoxical role. It does not stand against you. It leads you. Every moment of terror, every anxious hesitation is like a compass needle pointing toward the parts of your soul that remain unclaimed. Jung wrote that only by turning toward these dark, avoided places can we weave together the fragments of our psyche into something whole. Yet modern culture tells us the opposite. We live in an age obsessed with speed, comfort, and shortcuts. When fear arises, we are taught to smother it instantly, medicate it, rationalize it, bury it beneath motivational slogans. Countless self-help books promise to eliminate fear in 5 steps, or banish anxiety forever. But have you noticed how these promises rarely last? Fear returns because the root has not been touched. Take anxiety as an example. Today, it is treated primarily as a symptom to be erased. We talk about chemical imbalances, prescribe pills, and design distractions. Jung, however, would have asked a deeper question. What is this anxiety trying to reveal? What is my soul pointing me toward that I have refused to face? To him, anxiety was not a flaw, but a flare, a signal rising from the unconscious. Sometimes it points to repressed pain, sometimes it points to a neglected dream, and sometimes it points to a contradiction inside us, the tension between who we are and who we pretend to be. Here lies the heart of individuation. You are not here to become fearless. You are here to become whole. And wholeness demands that you walk into the very places you have avoided to gather back the pieces you have rejected. Jung used mythological imagery to describe this. He compared the psyche to a vast, dark forest. Most people spend their lives skirting the edges, staying on the safe, well-trodden paths. But individuation requires you to leave the road and step into the trees. The forest is frightening because it is unknown. Yet within its shadows lie the treasures of self-discovery, strength you never claimed, creativity you buried, love you denied yourself. Fear is the threshold of that forest. It is not there to block you. It is there to tell you, this way lies your becoming. To truly understand fear from Jung's perspective, we must first understand the architecture of the mind as he envisioned it. Unlike many thinkers of his time, Jung did not see the psyche as a single, tidy unit. Instead, he described it as a layered, living system, a vast inner cosmos made of conscious and unconscious realms, each with its own inhabitants. At the surface lies the conscious mind, the part we identify with most easily. This is the I you speak of when you say, "I am afraid." Here, fear often appears in its most obvious forms: the fear of losing your job, the fear of failing an exam, the fear of being embarrassed in public. These fears feel tangible because they attach themselves to real, immediate situations. But Jung warned us not to be deceived by appearances. Conscious fear is often only the visible tip of a much deeper iceberg. Beneath it lies the personal unconscious, a reservoir filled with forgotten experiences, painful memories, and all the traits we've judged unworthy. It is here that fear often takes root. For instance, someone terrified of public speaking may believe the fear comes from the act of standing before a crowd. But Jung would ask, what wound does this really touch? Perhaps it is the buried memory of being humiliated as a child, or the hidden conviction that one's voice is not worth hearing. The guardian of this realm is what Jung called the shadow. The shadow is not evil. It is simply the collection of everything we deny or repress. Vulnerability, jealousy, neediness, creativity, even joy can end up in the shadow if they don't fit the image we want the world to see. Fear often radiates from these unacknowledged places. Consider the person who builds an identity around being confident and strong. Their deepest terror may not be danger or failure, but vulnerability itself, the very thing they cannot bear to integrate. Deeper still, beyond the personal unconscious, Jung identified something even more mysterious: the collective unconscious. This is the bedrock of the psyche, a shared reservoir of archetypes, universal patterns of thought, image, and emotion that belong not to individuals, but to all humanity. Here, fear takes its most symbolic forms. It becomes the terror of the dark, the fear of death, the anxiety of abandonment. These are not just your fears. They are the fears of countless generations, carried like ancient echoes in your blood. Jung likened this inner structure to a great cathedral. The conscious mind is the outer courtyard where everyday life bustles. The personal unconscious is the dim inner chamber, filled with relics of your past. And the collective unconscious is the crypt below, older than memory, where the bones of ancestral experience rest. Fear can move through every level of this cathedral. Sometimes it stands at the door, easy to name. Other times, it rises from the crypt, speaking in dreams and symbols you barely understand. This is why simply conquering fear on the surface never works. You cannot silence what you refuse to hear. You cannot kill a messenger whose task is to deliver truth. The psyche will keep sending the signal until you descend into its depths and learn to listen. Fear is not only personal, it is ancient, vast, and shared. Jung believed that beneath the individual mind lies the collective unconscious, a deep reservoir where the experiences of humanity are stored and coded as patterns he called archetypes. These archetypes are like timeless roles or images that surface again and again in myths, dreams, and stories across all cultures. And many of them are inseparably bound to fear. Consider the hero's journey. In nearly every civilization, from Greek epics to Norse sagas to tribal initiation rituals, the hero must confront a terrifying unknown. There are monsters to slay, labyrinths to navigate, underworlds to descend into. These ordeals are not literal, they are symbolic expressions of universal fears: fear of death, fear of failure, fear of losing one's way. The dragon that blocks the treasure, The monster lurking in the cave, the storm raging at sea, these are not random inventions. They are mirrors of the inner trials every human must face. Another powerful archetype is the shadow itself. On a personal level, the shadow holds what you reject in yourself. But on the collective level, it represents what societies refuse to acknowledge: taboos, secrets, forbidden desires. Think of the way entire cultures project their fears onto outsiders, scapegoats, or imagined enemies. These collective shadows often erupt in times of crisis, when fear spreads like wildfire and ancient archetypal anxieties come to life. Fear of the unknown is perhaps the most primal. It is why myths are filled with uncharted lands, haunted forests, and oceans that drop off the edge of the world. Even today, our fascination with black holes, alien life, or artificial intelligence carries that same archetypal echo. What we don't understand, we fear, and yet, paradoxically, we are drawn to it, sensing that it holds something essential to our growth. Jung argued that archetypes act like invisible blueprints. They shape not only our inner lives, but also the collective dramas of history. The fear of death, for instance, is tied to the archetype of the eternal cycle, the awareness that everything must end, only to begin again. The fear of abandonment ties back to the mother archetype, reflecting humanity's ancient longing for nurture and safety. The fear of judgment is linked to the terrible father archetype, the stern voice of authority that demands perfection. And here is where Jung's insight becomes most striking. When you feel fear, it is not merely your own. It is the voice of countless ancestors speaking through you. The trembling before the dark cave, the hesitation before stepping into the unknown, these have echoed in the human heart for millennia. Recognizing this can be strangely comforting. It means you are not alone. Your fear is part of a much larger story, the story of humanity itself. So the next time fear grips you, ask not only, "What is this fear saying about me?" but also, "What is this fear saying about us?" Because often, the monsters we meet in dreams and waking life are the same ones our ancestors faced. They are archetypal teachers, waiting for us to listen. If fear is a messenger and a signpost, then what lies beyond it? For Jung, fear was not merely an inconvenience of human existence. It was the very threshold to transformation. It appears at the doorway of every major shift in life, as if asking, "Are you ready to grow?" Think about the moment of a midlife crisis, something Jung studied with profound attention. At a certain stage, many people begin to feel an unsettling terror, fear of aging, fear of losing relevance, fear that they have lived a life not truly their own. Modern society treats this as pathology, a problem to be medicated or distracted away. But Jung saw it differently. He believed this fear was sacred. It was the psyche's way of forcing us to turn inward, to face what we have avoided, and to begin the second half of life not with denial, but with authenticity. This pattern is older than psychology. In myths across cultures, fear always precedes initiation. In tribal societies, young people were led into the wilderness, blindfolded, starved, tested with fire or blood. The purpose was not cruelty, it was transformation. Only by facing terror could the initiate shed the old identity and step into the new. The Greeks told of Orpheus descending into the underworld. The Buddhists spoke of Mara, the demon of fear, confronting the Buddha beneath the Bodhi tree. Always the moment of greatest fear is the moment just before rebirth. Jung often compared this process to entering a dark cave. At first, the entrance terrifies us. The air is thick, the unknown presses in. Yet within that cave lies the treasure we seek, the hidden truth of who we are. The cave is frightening precisely because it holds what we need most, the parts of ourselves we've buried. Joseph Campbell, influenced deeply by Jung, captured this in one sentence. "The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. Take the universal fear of death. It is not simply dread of an ending. It is a reminder of life's fragility, urging us to live more fully. Or consider the fear of failure, often not about failure itself, but about confronting our hunger for meaning, our need to define ourselves beyond society's applause. Fear of irrelevance, fear of rejection, fear of the unknown. Each, when followed inward, becomes a doorway to a deeper self. And here lies the paradox. What we most avoid contains what we most need. The shadow does not conceal only wounds. It conceals gifts. A person terrified of vulnerability may, upon embracing it, discover profound empathy. Someone afraid of their own anger may uncover a source of passion and justice. Fear guards these treasures because without preparation we might misuse them. But with awareness they become the very material of transformation. Modern culture often promises quick fixes, 5 steps to crush fear, 10 mantras to silence anxiety. But Jung's wisdom cuts deeper. Fear cannot be destroyed, only integrated. It must be walked through like a threshold. It is not a wall, but a gateway. And when you dare to cross it, you don't just survive the encounter, you emerge changed. Fear, in this sense, is not the end of the path. It is the beginning of something greater. Theory becomes powerful only when it is lived. To see fear not as an enemy, but as a guide, we need only look at the stories of those who have confronted it. Take Mariana, for example. On paper, her life was flawless. A successful career, the respect of her peers, and the admiration of her community. Yet every time she was asked to step into the spotlight, leading a project, giving a presentation, she froze. A paralyzing fear gripped her. She explained it away by insisting she simply disliked attention, but in Jungian therapy, another truth surfaced. Her terror was not really about standing on stage. It was about being seen as imperfect. As a child, she had learned that mistakes were unacceptable, that errors brought shame, ridicule, or withdrawal of love. Those memories sank into her unconscious, but they did not die. They lived on in her shadow, whispering that exposure meant humiliation. So when she stood before a crowd, her fear was not of the audience. It was of her own shadow, the part of her that still trembled at the thought of being flawed. When Mariana began to face this fear, not as a curse but as a messenger, she uncovered something transformative. She realized her perfectionism was not strength, but a cage. Fear was showing her what she most needed, permission to be human. By embracing imperfection, she reclaimed freedom. Now consider Raphael, a gifted artist who spent years unable to create. He told himself he lacked inspiration, but deep down, he knew the truth. He was terrified of judgment. Every time he tried to paint, an inner critic sneered, "You're not good enough. Everyone will see your failure." But when Raphael explored this through Jung's framework, he discovered the real source of his fear. It wasn't the voices of critics outside, it was his own. His shadow contained a relentless inner judge, one he had projected onto the world. He feared not rejection from others, but rejection from himself. When he finally recognized this, something shifted. Raphael began to paint again, not for approval, but for truth. His art no longer sought applause. It sought authenticity. And with that, his creativity returned. Fear, in both these cases, was not a wall, but a mirror. For Mariana, it reflected her exile of imperfection. For Raphael, it revealed his inner critic. Both discovered that what they feared most was not external at all, but internal, and in turning toward it, they grew. Fear also shapes our relationships. Consider the fear of abandonment, one of the deepest wounds humans carry. Some people respond by avoiding intimacy altogether, terrified of being left. Others cling desperately, controlling and suffocating, determined to keep the other from walking away. Jung would see this not just as insecurity, but as the activation of an archetype, the wounded lover. This archetype reflects both our longing for love and the scars left by early rejection. When the fear of abandonment arises, it is not only about a partner leaving. It is a mirror of something deeper, the child within who once felt unsafe, unseen, or unloved. When someone dares to face this fear, to trace its roots, they often discover patterns that have ruled their lives in silence. What looked like a relationship problem reveals itself as a profound opportunity for healing. By listening to fear, they begin not only to mend relationships with others, but also the broken relationship with themselves. These stories remind us, fear is rarely about what it seems. Behind every surface terror lies a deeper truth. The task is not to suppress or conquer, but to listen. All of Jung's ideas would mean little if they stayed trapped in books and theories. He was clear about this. Transformation happens not in abstract thought, but in lived experience. So how do we begin to work with fear in our daily lives? How do we turn it from a haunting presence into a guiding companion? The first step is deceptively simple: awareness. Instead of reacting instantly when fear arises, pause. Notice it. Ask yourself, what is this fear trying to tell me? That single question shifts the relationship. Fear stops being an enemy to silence and becomes a messenger to interpret. The second step is to observe repeating patterns. Fear rarely acts at random. Do you notice the same dread surfacing in similar situations, speaking in public, trying something new, opening up emotionally? These patterns are clues pointing toward areas of life you've been avoiding. The consistency of your fear shows you exactly where the work lies. The third step is to externalize fear through writing. Jung often encouraged his patients to record their dreams and inner experiences, believing that writing creates a bridge between the conscious and unconscious. When you put your fears into words, on paper, not just in your head, you begin to see their shape. You can recognize connections, triggers, and hidden memories that were previously invisible. A fourth tool is shadow exploration. Ask yourself, what parts of me do I dislike, deny, or hide from others? Fear often guards these shadow aspects. Perhaps you fear vulnerability because you secretly despise your own fragility. Perhaps you fear failure because you've disowned the part of you that longs to take risks. Bringing these exiled parts back into awareness is not weakness, it is wholeness. Dreams, too, hold enormous power. Jung called them the direct messages of the unconscious. When frightening or uncomfortable dreams appear, don't dismiss them. Instead, study them. What symbols keep recurring? What emotions rise up? A monster in a dream may represent not an external danger, but an inner truth you've been avoiding. By decoding the language of dreams, you can uncover what your waking self resists. Another practice is to connect with archetypes. Ask yourself, which inner figure is active in me right now? Are you the hero, standing at the threshold of a challenge? Are you facing the shadow, confronting what you deny? Is the wise old man or woman whispering guidance that you're afraid to hear? Recognizing these inner roles turns your fear into part of a larger mythic journey, reminding you that you walk a path traveled by countless souls before you. And perhaps the most practical step of all, walk toward discomfort, one step at a time. This doesn't mean diving headfirst into chaos. It means leaning gently into what you resist. If you fear rejection, begin by allowing yourself to express a small vulnerability. If you fear failure, attempt something modest and imperfect. Each step weakens the illusion that fear is a wall. You discover instead that it is a veil, thin, penetrable, waiting for you to pass through. None of these practices will erase fear. That is not the goal. The goal is to transform your relationship with fear, from adversary to ally, from saboteur to guide. And once you begin, you may notice something extraordinary. The very places you once avoided become the places where your deepest strength is born. We've walked far into Jung's world, and now we reach the heart of it. Fear is not something to be erased. It is something to be honored. In everyday language, fear feels like a chain, something that traps us, holds us back, keeps us small. But in Jung's vision, fear is not a chain. It is a compass. It points again and again toward the exact places where our soul longs to grow. And, like any compass, it will keep turning until we learn to follow it. Jung's famous words echo here. What you resist persists. The more we reject fear, the stronger it becomes. But the moment we turn and face it, not with violence, but with curiosity, its power changes. It no longer dominates us, it begins to guide us. Think of the great archetypal images we explored: the hero and the dragon, the shadow and the cave, the lover and abandonment. These myths are not dusty relics, they are mirrors of our own lives. Every time you feel afraid, you stand at the edge of one of these ancient stories. Fear is the threshold to the underworld, the dragon that guards the treasure, the storm before the transformation. This does not mean walking with fear is easy. Integration demands courage, but more than courage, it demands compassion. True freedom is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to walk forward even while fear whispers in your ear. Freedom is the moment you realize fear is not your captor, but your companion. Imagine you are standing before a major life decision, moving to a new city, starting a relationship, leaving behind an old identity. Fear rises. It urges you to stay safe, to remain in the familiar. But if you listen more closely, you may hear something else. Beneath the warning is an invitation. This is where your becoming waits. Fear of loneliness, when examined, reveals a hunger for deeper connection. Fear of failure uncovers the way we've tied our worth to the applause of others. Fear of death reminds us that life is precious and finite. Each fear, when understood, becomes a teacher. This is why Jung considered fear sacred. It is the guardian of the cave, the keeper of treasures, the whisper of the unconscious saying, "Come closer, there is something here you must see." So the next time fear rises, don't turn away. Sit with it. Ask it what it wants you to know. Walk with it, even if only one step at a time, because beyond fear lies not just survival, but transformation. And in that transformation, you discover something astonishing. Fear was never your enemy. It was your guide all along. So stay curious. Stay courageous. And remember, your fear is not a flaw. It is a doorway. On the other side waits not only freedom, but wholeness.